Okay, went through the signs. So once we got through these basic categories, we're starting to have to look at we go into the modes, the cardinal, fixed, immutable modes, the cardinal driving modes. These are really notable: Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. They're the ones that push, that are driving to make something happen. You put Saturn there, you get a serious driving person. It may be cautious, it may be delayed, it may be a little bit slow. It's starting out in one's youth, but it's going to be working to have power to accomplish something. The Aries is going to push in one way to be able to do things. The Cancer is going to push in there to get their security. The Libra is going to push to achieve a relationship. And the Capricorn is push to get social security and status. And so these factors will come in and encourage the Saturn, and encourage the self-discipline, so that I can do more myself, so that I can be more secure, so that I can be more steady in a relationship, so that I can be useful at work, so that I can accomplish things. So the Saturn it's not the Saturn influencing the sign, it's the sign that's influencing the Saturn and creating a certain set of agendas that are going to cause depression and achievement, inhibition and ambition. So you're usually going to meet people that got this problem. Oh, geez, this is my problem. You know, or how do you think about your dad? Or what you walk into it and you say, well, what are you going to do about that? Then you have to turn around and see, well, how you have to work to overcome that. You can't always see it right away because your son's going to be aligned with it or not fighting it or going with it. So the other factors will come in and see how well this is reinforced or how feebly it's there. But still, for you to get respect, for you to get accomplishment, you have to use your Saturn. You have to have your discipline. You have to have without discipline, without some restraint, there's going to be too much violence and aggression around. So Saturn is that voice of restraint, but it's ambitious, it's pushy, it's driving to impose the restrictions, to impose the inhibition, or to be very ambitious. So in the cardinal signs, you have a pushy sense of responsibility. So adults and other people in authority may push you, and you're having to compete with it. And then when you're in authority, you may push yourself and push other people because you're in a driving mode, but you're not going to be that fixed or that flexible. You're going to be pushing when you can't push. Why bother? So generally, this group will thrive on being challenged for their ambition, challenged over their inhibition. They'll challenge themselves. When we get to the fixed signs, so the cardinal sense is pushing to accomplish, or they're pushing to be, if they're feeling inhibited, they're pushing their discontent. If they're seeing they're working on, they're pushing to get ahead of it. They're pushing to make something work. They're pushing their work ethic. So their work ethic on how to direct your Mars and how to direct your energy, and what Jupiter is trying to understand will be this pushy type of ambition. And that pushy type means you can push into something and then have to go on to something else, or not be so. You have to be pushing. You can't get bored, or just too fixed at any one thing. There also always has to be something better to go towards. So as soon as you accomplish something, there's got to be the next thing. When you put it into the fixed signs, the Saturn stabilizes and gets very stubborn and determined. These are people who stay at the same job or get into a mood or depression with something or feel inhibited with something, and it becomes fixated. They're fixed on it. So their Saturn, this is here forever. This is going on forever. I'm so bored. I'm so tired. But once it gets working well, I'm working on this, I'm disciplined. They would be tenacious at holding the same discipline. Slow to pick it up, slow to let it go. Fairly rigid in their relationship to authority, both for better or worse. But there is a need to cultivate the determination to work towards something and to achieve something. That's true for all of them, but that's how you see it. And then you see well, what if it's going this way? You see it, they're not exactly doing it. Then you start saying, well, how do you advise that? I mean, to me, the colors and the geometry expresses far more than 100 sentences. One picture is worth 1,000 words. No? But this is the second of the modes, the fixed sign of each season. Then you have the mutable sign of each season. This is the multiple choice perceptive manipulative signs. So if you have Saturn in a mutable sign, it's going to be hard to be consistent. Saturn in a fixed sign will be naturally consistent with their responsibilities. Saturn in the cardinal sign will be naturally driving to prove something. But in the mutable sign, it's very adaptable. I could work at this, I could work at this. I learned a language here, I took a job here, I took this other type of job there. And it would be a much more diversified relationship to ambition and authority and to depression. Many different ways, many different options. And it's going to be hard to, like, it's the only mode that Saturn doesn't rule. Saturn has a rulership in Capricorn in the cardinal, it rules Aquarius in the fixed, but in the mutable it doesn't rule anything. So there's too many options. How do you choose? I'm going to do a bit of this, bit of that, but time can go by without doing any one thing long enough. At the same time, one is quite capable of doing 3 or 4 things at the same time and multitasking. So you don't want to look at it as just negative. You want to say, here's the restrictions, here's the potential limitation, and how do you solve that? And then you begin to get your understanding working with Saturn, and you begin to see, oh, this could really work. If you did it like this might really work. Okay, it's where it gets, these things get really, if someone's had a big breakdown or a heartbreak and they're going through therapy, they've lost themselves, having to rebuild everything, just going over your chart and rebuilding each factor that you have is an affirmation that will help affirm the parts of nature that you need to be. And so this is incredibly useful for personal therapy. I think studying astrology is all part of that. When Saturn's in the mutable signs, or in the fire signs, we're going to the elements now. When Saturn's in the fire signs, fire burns brightly. Saturn dampens the fire, or is a restriction. You have the fire going up and start saying, wait a second. So the pride, the enthusiasm, the fun-lovingness of the fire has the planet of breaks, of discipline, of responsibility in it. So you're going to try and whistle while you work or make fun of what you work or do things you kind of like doing. It's attracted to work, to making things more fun. But there's the depression about, I'm not shining enough, I'm not glowing enough. These are the signs that want to have fun and do things. That when Saturn's in there, there's this serious element comes in. You're trying to be responsible about that specific area. So you might have Saturn Aries and you're pushing to work, you're pushing to do things. You just get bored with, as soon as it gets boring, you don't want to do it. It's not interesting anymore, so it's hard to stay at the same thing. And you have to fight to push, or you find work that allows you to work perhaps impulsively, and it's more of a stop-start thing. So there could be many different types of jobs that come in, but the pride will be the key that affects the Saturn. I'm working this, I'm not taking this, I can't put up with this, they're not treating me right, I'm out of here. All of these 3 signs have that. But they're also prepared to work to get the attention, to get noticed. So you can use it, and there's 12 different ways you can use Saturn, and 12 different attitudes you pick up towards self-restraint, towards discipline, towards achievement, towards accomplishment, towards respect. Words, but they all point to a certain type of energy. When you go to air signs, the worry, so with the fire signs, the action is restricted. With the air signs, the ideas are restricted. You got to think, I got to be interested, I got to work towards growing instrument. I don't know enough. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody's talking to me. I don't want to say what I'm thinking, because it puts a restriction on the communications of the 3 air signs. Saturn in there means you're going to be a little more cautious or strategic or measured in your expressions. So if you start with this measured expression, you can work with it till you learn to express it, but it can be an inhibition and you have it turned off. It can be something you learn in time that you're ready to work for. To me, who needs an education? Who wants to write? I don't know, like the Saturn being there, it's a struggle for Saturn to express the signs. Mercury or Mars, they just jump into it, or Venus or the Moon, they just pick up the sign. They have so many ways they embellish it. Saturn comes in with causes, with I don't know how much I want to do it, but the more it's able to do, the more it's able to accomplish using that attitude, the more fulfilled they'll become in life. But the more you go against it and don't do it, the more, with these signs, with the air signs, the more ignorance builds up. So there is a pressure to get to know what you're talking about and not feel nobody's listening to me, I got to get better at this, I got to be able to work at this. You have to, so education and intellectual things be important to accomplish. or to work with. But again, the attitude is generally against it, and then because it's against it, you have to work at it to accomplish it, and then you've taken care of it, so it's not a worry anymore. They tend to be serious thinkers. The thinking tends to be serious. The rationale around what I'm working is I got to work on a plan. I'm going to think of this idea. I got to get an idea what I'm going to do next or what I have to achieve. So those, the fire in the air, I got to be active. I'm working at the action. I'm working at the expressing of the ideas. Those are the masculine projective Saturns. When we get to the Saturn that's going to be reflective, in the feminine sign, we're taking things in. This is the water signs. So the water signs, they're emotional. They take everything personally. Saturn's in there. If there's a bit of depression there, it's not going to be a bit of a depression. It's, oh, me. It's going to be an emotional depression. And then to get out of it, I'm going to have to take care of this. Oh, gee, it's going to be, they'll be less rational about the careers they take, more emotional or dedicated, trying to find something to work at emotionally. I say to work at because we're looking, you see how someone works, what jobs they take, but how you're processing authority and responsibility on a personal level. Usually you'll see this in relationship to Saturn and Mars, or to Jupiter and Mars, and then how it affects the inner planets. So there's these layers to see. We're looking at the outer shell here. But the Saturn still in the water signs is going to be more emotional, less rational. Well, emotional can be very idealistic, it can be very dedicated, it can be very sincere, but it can be moody, it can be judgmental. So the person's going to take everything personally about what they're working towards and what they're not working to. So if they're not getting respect, it's going to bother them. If they're getting respect, they'll feel good about it. And they'll be seriously going it. So this can be a very ambitious thing, but it's not passion. It's not, they have to feel okay. If they're working somewhere where they don't feel okay, if someone's not feeling good to them or is putting them down for their feelings, they won't stay there. It'll cause the depression. So you have cardinal, fixed, mutable, water. So there's 3 different types of water, but water element itself is emotional, sensitive, sensual, and Saturn in there is trying to put the brakes on those things. So there's a caution about those. So it inhibits that. It's not that it's inhibiting the sign, but that sign coming through Saturn is going to show inhibited qualities of that sign. As you see the outer planets, it's easier to see how it affects the signs. With the Jupiter in it, it's easier to see the sign affecting the planet. Really, the planets are affecting the signs, but because it's a whole generation of 2.5 years for Saturn, and then more for the outer planets, we begin to see how you sort of have to see how it affects the sign, but it's not really the best way to see it. You want to find how they're working, what's respect, what's not, how do they feel about what they've accomplished up till now? What do they feel they need to do to feel more secure? And so that sensitivity can go and work with problems of other people and other situations. They can emotionally, they work with those things, but when it's positive, it's a very sincere element of commitment. When it's negative, it's a very emotional depression of being, I'll never fix this, it has an irrational ambition. So, okay.